Welcome to Gotta Run. My name is Lance Svendsen, and today we're going to be talking about the topic of suicide, which is not a topic that gets brought up nearly enough. And though it's a topic that is often painful and uncomfortable, it's one that, when is brought up in a healthy way, can really be beneficial to everyone involved. So recently, there's been many events that have brought the topic of suicide more into the forefront. And the first one is the Netflix series 13 Reasons Why, which is about a girl who ended up committing suicide, but before doing so, she left 13 Reasons Why she felt like she had no way out. One of the great things about that show is that it brought up the conversation and got it more into the forefront of students and adults. Recently, there has been a famous YouTuber who had an incident where he was filming and all of a sudden he came upon someone who actually just recently committed suicide in what is known as the famous suicide forest in Japan. So that is another one of the things that have brought the topic more into the forefront. So we want to bring a panel together today to talk more about this very important topic. So with me today, I have Diana Colbreth, Chrissy Wong, and Drew Huber. So ladies, Drew, thank you so much for being here today. And this is a topic that is sensitive, and every situation is different. So today we really want to spend some time talking about what happens to those people that are left behind after a suicide. And not only that, but what about those who have attempted a suicide, but then were given a second chance at life? Chrissy and Drew, we're going to start with you guys.
Sure. My mother committed suicide in 2005, Memorial Day weekend. I grew up in Maine. That's where they were living. All my sisters and my parents were living. I remember it was Memorial Day weekend because my mother called me that week and said, "You have to come up this weekend. You have to come up." And I hadn't wanted to, but she was so insistent. I'm like, all right, fine, I'll come up. And I came up and it was fine. But right before I left, she pulled me aside and said, "I'm going away for a while." And I was very confused because she didn't do things on her own like that. And I'm like, "What do you mean? Are you taking a trip? Where are you going?" And she wouldn't answer any of my questions. And she got upset about it. And I didn't really know what to do. And I basically said, well, you do what you have to do. And, I just want you to be happy. And left it at that. And I started driving back to New York. And it was bothering me. So I actually pulled over and called my sister and said, "Would you please go over to the house? Mom's acting really weird. I don't know what's going on. Could you check it out?" And so she did, and we, nothing really happened. And so we thought it was fine. But the next day, she disappeared, left without a trace. And my dad called us all and said, "I can't find your mother." And we're like, okay, well, she's probably just gone off. She'll come back. And then about half an hour later, he called us and said, "All the liquor is gone and all the prescription medicine is gone from the cabinet." And that's when we started having a real idea of what happened. It wasn't much longer that the police showed up at my sister's door. They had found her in her car in a parking lot about 20 miles south of where we live. And she had taken all of the pills with alcohol and just died in the car. We never thought she would do something like that. We joked that she was living for her grandkids. There were 3 grandchildren, all very, very young. And we thought, as upset as she might get, she's never going to leave these kids. But we were wrong. And so, yeah, I've hated Memorial Day weekend ever since then.
Well, thank you so much for being willing to share that story. And Drew, would you be willing to share your story?
Sure. For me, the topic of suicide really started in high school. I played volleyball and had a close friend that I played volleyball with. And we had kind of lost touch for a little while, and I found out later from a co-friend that he had committed suicide. And that was the first time I ever experienced it in any kind of way or knew anybody. But then later, just a few years later, actually, when I went off to be in the Navy, my uncle committed suicide while I was gone. And I can't say that him and I were super close or anything, but it was very hard on my dad because it was his brother. So we had to deal with that as a family. And then actually just recently, maybe a year and a half ago, my cousin, not the same father and son, but another cousin from the same side of the family, actually, he committed suicide as well. again, I can't say that him and I were super close, but it was close enough to home, to impact me and impact our family again.
Yeah.
It felt kind of, when we found out, it was kind of like, it felt like we were being haunted by it. It was like something with our family. I help out with the youth group at my church. I was doing a run with you actually for the Caring Contact Suicide Prevention Hotline. And I brought it up to one of the girls in the youth group because she's a runner, and asked her if she wanted to participate in the 5K run. And she's like, oh, I know them. They saved my life. And, that's just one of those things that you just don't expect to hear, and was just a shock to me. And then so we've since been involved with that organization more, just because of that, because of, knowing somebody that was saved by it, of course, so.
Yeah. Well, I currently sit on the board for a counseling center in our town, and when we get with the counselors and talking about this topic, one of the things they bring up is this thing of survivor's guilt. And recently I was talking to my friend whose father-in-law committed suicide, and I guess that morning he had called her, but she had missed the call. And she said that she's regretted that moment, thinking like, could she have done something more? So my question is that something that you guys have replayed over in your mind as well?
It's actually been a two-factor kind of guilt. I have had moments where I wish I had realized what was going on when she was saying I'm going away. I should have put the pieces together and been like, wait a minute. And I didn't. And I do wonder, would things have been different if I had called her out on it? Because she kept it obviously so secret. But the other guilt, to be perfectly honest, is that in some ways her death made everybody's lives easier. And it's not easy to admit that, but my mom had she had a tough road to hoe. There was certainly abuse in her childhood, although we're not really sure exactly what kind or how much, but she was a damaged soul, and it was obvious all through our childhood, all through growing up. She was very unpredictable, very powerful in the way she affected the family. And so in some ways, her suicide actually made everybody feel a little bit more at peace. We knew she wasn't tormented anymore. She wasn't living with this pain that we knew had been eating at her for her entire life. And it changed our family dynamic so that it wasn't quite so difficult all the time. And so, of course, I don't wish my mother had died, but in some ways it brought a certain kind of peace to the family, most of all for her. And I don't know if I believe in heaven or hell or whatever, but I do believe she is now somewhere where she is not in anguish all the time. And so that at least gives me a little bit of peace about it.
Yeah, the hardest one for me of those three that I mentioned were the one in high school. I was young, maybe not as wise as I am now, if I am wise at all, but it was really tough because we had kind of lost contact, like I said, and sort of drifted apart as friends. And of course, right away, you start thinking, well, had I stayed in contact with him, could I have made a difference?
Right.
Would I have been able to help him? Would I have been able to see the signs or whatever it was? And that one honestly is probably the one that haunts me the most still to this day, because there are questions that will never get answered. You just have to live with those. My best friend, his stepmom just committed suicide recently, just this past year, and he went through the same thing. He had breakfast with her once a week, and never noticed anything. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary with her, and they were very close, and she's gone.
Yeah.
And of course you start thinking, what can you do? What should I have done?
That brings me to the next question, where you had a friend that you could talk to, and then after that happened in his life, he was able to talk to you. Do you guys find it's helpful to have people that you can go to, especially when dealing with grief? Because grief is something that we all go through, but not everyone has the same story where they're able to relate exactly. But so dealing with grief, is it helpful having people like that?
Oh, absolutely. Our family was lucky in that we were not afraid to talk about it amongst ourselves and the immediate family. In the more extended family, there were definitely people who did not want to talk about it, and so we just didn't with them. But it was very helpful to be able to talk to people about it. And I had an interesting experience. I was at work, and everybody knew that my mother had died because I was gone for a few days and whatever. And a colleague was in the office with me and said, "Oh, I heard your mother died. I'm so sorry." And I said, "Thank you." And she said, "Oh, was she sick?" And that is the question that, it's like, how do you answer that? Because in some ways, yeah, she really was. She really was sick. And in other ways, how do I explain it? So I said, in a way. And she kept pushing, "Oh, was it cancer? Oh, was it this?" And so finally, I just looked at her and said, "She took her own life." And that poor woman, she was just trying to be kind, I know, but she just went, like, and she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And she left very quickly. I had flowers from her the next day, which was super nice. But not everybody is willing to sort of be open to it. But I find that as long as you've got one or two people who are willing to talk about it, that's what you need. You don't need a whole crew of them, but just a couple people to connect with that you know they get it.
Yeah.
And so thankfully my family has been able to do that. Without that, it would have been much more difficult.
And I haven't had someone that I know personally commit suicide, but I've had people in my life pass away. And I remember after my uncle passed away, people were trying to be consoling. And often they would say things trying to be helpful and then realizing they're not being helpful at all. Like you kind of mentioned, like when someone say, "Well, you know they're in a better place."
Right.
And in your mind, you want to say like, "Yes, I know that's true, but that's not helpful."
Right.
So as a way of maybe helping people kind of know what to say, or maybe a tip, like what is maybe something that people could say if they find out that you have experienced someone who committed suicide, or in the same way, something that you know they should not say? Would you have an example of one of those? Or
Yeah, well, I would never say to her, "Oh, your mom committed suicide." Well, I had a friend that committed suicide. Like I can't, our stories don't relate in that way.
And it's
like,
so different for everybody.
It's so different, you know, like I had a friend commit suicide, but it's totally a different experience than having your mom, obviously. And, you know, I kind of experienced the other side of this where I was my best friend, his stepmom. So I just listened. I just did my best to listen to him and you know, ask questions or, you know, just try and bring things out to help him in any way I could.
Yeah, the best thing is really just to connect with the person and their grief. It doesn't matter necessarily that it was suicide or whatever. It's just, "I'm so very sorry. I want to help you. I'm here." You know, just letting them know that you care and you're willing to listen. That you don't need to say anything per se. You know, like you don't have to say, "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. She's been a better place," or, you know, "It's all part of God's plan." Like, any of that.
Yeah.
Just let them know you care, and that even if you don't know yourself how to deal with it, you want to help them and be by their side. That's all you need.
Yeah, and often what they talk about is just being present. You know, just like being in the room, being near them, not even saying like, "Hey, can I do something for you?" But you being there lets them know that you're available.
And, you know, the bestest of friends, for example, know that Memorial Day weekend is not a happy time for me. And so remembering their grief doesn't go away after a few months. And in my case, I was kind of numb about it for a long time, and it really didn't hit me until much, much later. So just being aware that grief is going to be there for a really long time. And so if you can remind them every now and then, "You know what, I'm still here," that can be a real comfort.
Yeah, because a lot of people are there right away.
Right,
And they
which is great.
Yeah, but having that long-lasting support system is probably extremely helpful also. Deanna, I want to talk to you now because you have a different experience with suicide.
So in 1999, while I was at college, I was diagnosed with bipolar II disorder and borderline personality disorder. And it was diagnosed after a suicide attempt and after I was hospitalized. So for the next 5 years in college and up until 2007, I was hospitalized 5 different times after attempts. So I have a pretty strong history with suicide attempts. My most recent incident with actually calling the 1-800 number happened in 2013. And I found myself recently broken up with, totally unemployed without any prospects of jobs coming in my way. And I was about to literally be homeless because my lease was ending in less than 2 weeks. And if you can't really get a new apartment without a job, and I didn't have a job, and I definitely did not have enough income to like get anything. And I just felt completely hopeless. And the negative thoughts started coming, and they kind of, as they do with manic depression, they came on sort of suddenly, and it was a quick downward spiral. And without even like a lot of thought, I would say, there wasn't a lot of thinking that went into it. I ended up holed up in my small bathroom closet or bathroom, and I had pills, and I don't even remember what pills I had. I don't even know what we had in the apartment. But I had pills, and I think I had some alcohol in there. I'm not sure, to like wash everything down, because that's a way that I had attempted before, actually. And I was there, and I had an X-Acto knife as well, and I was just like, gonna do this, and I was a little bit jazzed about it, because it was sick and twisted sounding, but I kind of felt proud that I was actually motivated to do something. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get this done, I'm gonna accomplish something, and in the between sobs of depression. And I was just sitting there, and I was just like counting the pills, and like, okay, I got this, I'm gonna do this. And then I don't know how long that process was, how long I was in there, or how long I just kind of zoned out, just staring at the stuff. But there was this meow at the door. And I had 2 cats at the time, and then the sound of pawing at the door. I don't know how long she was doing that, but my cat Kaya, who I'd had for about 12 years at that point, just wanted to get inside. And it was probably because she was really hungry, and I probably needed to feed her, because during that state, in that time, I most likely had forgotten to feed her, because I'd forgotten to feed myself, I'd forgotten to take care of myself, the days that had led up to this moment, I just wasn't functioning. So she was just meowing and pawing and meowing and pawing and meowing and pawing, and it slowly broke through, and I was like, oh. And the thought that came through my head was, oh, it might be a while before someone finds me. She's not gonna eat for a while. I should effing feed her so that she could be fine. And weird twisted thought was like, because I don't want her to somehow get in here and eat on my face. Like, it's dark, it's twisted. So I just opened the door, and she immediately came in, and she started rubbing up against my legs, and like, got into my lap and cuddled with me. And it was like just a tiny little bit of enough for me to be like, whoa, what am I doing? All right, hey, yo. Like, I love moments like this, little cat. Like, I love you, I love you. And I still didn't feed her. Instead, I had my phone. I didn't, because I had my phone with me, and I was like, I need something. Because at that point, there's still this me that's like, die. And then there's this piece of me that's like, no, wait. So I had to Google the hotline number, and I called someone and ended up talking to this lovely woman on the other end. And as they do, like, helped bring me back to a place of like, I am here, put all this stuff away, fed my cat, and slowly started to come back from that. So that was the most recent.
You often hear about people saying, if I just knew somebody cared, just anybody. And for you, it was your cat. But still, it worked, and that was enough just to get you to the next spot, which was making that phone call.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not like I had a terrible life. I have a lot of wonderful people in my life, which is why I've actually been able to come this far. And in 2013, I also had a lot of amazing people in my life who I did end up reaching out to afterward and sort of rebuilding my base. But you talked about the survivor's guilt of like, what more could we have done? And honestly, like, once a person is, for me, I'm not gonna speak for everyone else. I need to take a step back and say that. But for me, when I got to those places and those moments, it didn't matter. It really didn't matter. Like, unless you could have been right there, like knocking on that door, like pulling things out of my hands, like it really wouldn't have mattered. Because it's just like this fog, this crushing fog that envelops you, and you cannot see your way out.
Yeah.
And especially at that moment, it had been a very long time since I had gotten any sort of help, or since I had been able to like come back and to the cognitive behavioral therapy that I had done early on. So I was a little bit out of touch with my coping mechanisms.
Right.
So that was another thing. So if your mom had never actually sought help, I'm just gonna say probably like there was really nothing that could have done it. Because for me, I know like I needed an army of people to get me back. Like I didn't have just
Or one cat.
or one cat. That was the beginning, you know, like easily, like as soon, like the next day, as soon as she wasn't meowing, like I could have easily gone back. It's not like a wham bam thing. It's a long freaking process, you know. And because it's manic depression and because it's the borderline personality disorder, it's not something that I'm over. It's something that I'm like working with. I don't like to say I'm battling it because it sounds like, oh, it's a fight and like someday I might lose. It's like, no, right now I'm working with it. It's here, it's part of me. I'm not going to deny it because when you deny it, that's the moment you forget that it's there. And so I know that I have the hotline numbers that I can call. My husband knows about my history, and I've given him like tools to be like, hey, you should just maybe look out for this. You know, if I don't see it myself, if I start to talk a certain way, there's that. Yeah. And that was, you know, and like I said, I'm an army of people. Like I had the therapy that I needed way back when I was in college, and I was able to fall back on that. You know, I had the medications back then that were able to like clear my head enough to have the therapy work. And then I slowly built this amazing group of friends around me who, at any given moment in time, I have like, you know, like 50 people that I could just like call randomly and be like, hey, what's up? Kind of feeling low, you know? And among that, I've come across other people who have experienced the same things.
My mother definitely did not feel like she had that kind of situation. I think she felt like she had to deal with it on her own, that nobody understood. I don't even think she understood it herself, honestly.
Right.
She left us all notes, but they did not answer any questions. But as far as we can sort of determine, sort of comparing notes, she really just felt like she didn't have any other options. She was a woman who she had never gone to college. She had worked here and there, but mostly her life's work was raising my sisters and me. And we were all grown, and she felt like she couldn't go anywhere. She didn't have anything to do, and she was in pain because she'd had literally 3 knee replacements. The second one got infected, and they had to take it out and do it again. And so, you know, she was in pain a lot, and I do sort of rationally know that even if all of us had been saying things to her, I think ultimately it wouldn't have mattered. She had decided this was what her life was going to be like, and she didn't want it anymore.
It just strikes me with what amazing courage you had, Deanna, to reach out to people. Like, you know, my friend didn't have the courage to say, hey, I need help, you know, and you did. You had the courage to ask somebody.
I had to be taught that, though.
Okay.
I just want to make it clear. Like, it's not about being stronger than other people or having, I mean, I appreciate that, but I was lucky enough to be taught that. And that's part of it. Why some people who feel like who can't remember that they have people in their lives, for me anyways, I had to be taught to look for those people. You know, like Mr. Rogers tells people to like look for the helpers in life. It doesn't come natural to a lot of people, you know. And
That's a good point.
The cognitive behavior therapy that I did, I had to go back and rely on that and look for people. And that's why I started to build my life with good people. Like, you know how it's hard to sometimes get rid of that toxic person?
Oh, yeah.
Because we were just like, oh, whatever. No. Like, I was you're out, you're done. You're good, I'm bringing you in. You know, I'm not gonna be toxic to you, but so a little bit of courage, but mostly it's just being lucky enough to have been able to get the help that I needed to teach me to do that, to teach me to ask for help, to know that there's a hotline, to know that I need to look at my friends, and I need to be unafraid of asking them. Because a lot of it is like, you don't want to be a burden to people.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to unlearn. Like I still, that's one of the things that I'm still like working through, you know, like even with my husband, there will be moments where I'm just like me, you know, and he's like, okay, I love you. I'm in this for life. Bring it.
If there was something that, if you guys could maybe give like a tip or share something with someone that would maybe just getting into a situation that you guys found yourself in, what would be like one tip or something that you'd be able to tell them?
I guess for me, if I can go first, there's a lot of memes out there that are things like, oh, running is my medication, running is my therapy. That's beautiful. That's great. But that's not the only thing that works for a lot of people. And it really stigmatizes those of us who needed to go through the process to actually understand how running could help us.
Right.
So if you are a person who's experiencing depression or suicidal thoughts, yes, running can help. Athleticism can help. Exercise could help. The right diet could help. Minerals, whatever you want to get into could help. But it's also really important and totally okay if you need to seek out psychiatric help and also be on medications.
Right.
Yeah. There's a stigma around like going to a counselor or taking medication, but those things are around because they're proven to help people.
Yeah.
I think I would just say, don't be afraid to talk about it. If someone in your life has been affected by it, don't be afraid to gently ask, do you want to talk about it? You know, don't skirt talking about that person or don't skirt the issue. Just be willing to be open to it if they want to. You know, you don't have to push them, but just be willing to let them know, if you want to talk about it, I will have that conversation with you, even though I know it's hard. Because even if they don't talk to you, knowing that you're willing helps a lot.
I don't know if it's helpful, but it's something I never joke about. It's something I never give any kind of humor to. Like I like to have a good time. I like to laugh and stuff. And you know, I have kids in elementary school, and they come home and they hear stuff at school, and they make little jokes and stuff. And anything that leans that way, I just tell them that's not something I'll joke about. That's not something I think is funny or, you know. And I, with them especially, is you know, I'm open. You can talk to me about anything. You know, like don't ever, you know.
Yeah.
So
That's a good point. People do say, "Oh, I'm going to kill myself if." We need to we need to take that out of our language because people don't realize they don't think about what they're saying anymore, and it would be a good first step to taking that stigma away from it.
Or even using like the term schizo or, oh, she's so bipolar or manic depressive as like a slur or cray-cray or people saying that they're OCD, even that. It's like, no, really don't think you are.
Until the larger conversation about mental illness becomes easier for people
there's still a stigma.
To face, I think suicide will still remain something really difficult for people to talk about because the two very often go hand in hand. And so until we're more comfortable talking about diseases of the mind, we're never going to be comfortable talking about what people do when they suffer from those kinds of issues.
That's well said.
hopefully this was a good first step.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Well, guys, thank you so much for being willing to share these emotional times in your life, but I really think it's helpful. And if conversations like this were able to help just one person, I mean, how cool would that be? It'd be extremely worth it. So thank you, Will, again for having us and entrusting me to host another one of your specials, and we appreciate it. So see you guys again.